Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Farming Focus, the podcast for Southwest farmers brought to you by Cornish Mutual. I'm your host, Peter Green. Today we're looking at the lessons that farmers can learn from participating in environmental schemes. So what works, what doesn't, but also how to make the most of the opportunities to improve our farm environments. Joining me once again are Dr. Laura Underdown and Jonathan Chapman, who will share a bit about their personal experiences and advice for farmers thinking about getting involved in an environmental scheme or schemes, whether that's publicly or privately funded. So, Jonathan, has the extent to which you're working with nature on your farm always been at that level, or is it something that previous generations did, or has there been sort of an evolution? Can you just share a bit about your journey, please?
Yeah, so it's family farm. My dad very much focused on production, which in the 70s, 80s was definitely the thing to do. And, he went from a farm at 40 acres to 550 acres doing that. Whereas the mindset has changed since I've taken on, really. Yeah, you can produce as much as you like now, but you got to make a profit. Yeah. Whereas in the past, you could just produce some juice and you made money. Mm-hmm. So there's been quite a mindset change there. Yeah, the nature of the farm we have, there's a lot of what you call poorer ground, but and it's just come from like looking at what can we do with that ground, how can we make money out of it, which is and these various schemes come along. You're like, well, if I do that and agree to do this, and we've had money in the past for keeping stock off in the winter for 5 months. Put a lot of the ground in that heavy wet ground, and some of it's been classed as priority habitat. Some is neighbouring priority habitat. You're like, well, could we upgrade that? So we just sort of evolved over time to the point that it's a third of my turnover is now from the sort of S5 mid-tiers, those sort of things.
Yeah. So two things there really resonate from what we spoke about last week in the main episode. One is that, again, you've looked at your ground and what you're already doing, and you've not let the tail wag the dog, as we spoke about, but you've thought, well, what are we doing and how can that maybe overlap with some of the environmental schemes that are out there? But also, it sounds like, and this is something we maybe got on towards the end of last week's episode, you've looked quite critically in quite high resolution at what the different areas of the farm can do and whether there's something that could be done slightly differently on them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you look at your ground, and my good grass fields are producing 10 ton dry matter per hectare per year.
Nice.
And you think, well, I can increase that by 20%, would be 12 ton quite easily. But then you look at your poorer ground and maybe do something like 2, 3, 4 ton dry matter per hectare a year. Well, it takes a hell of a lot of money and effort to put another 2 ton dry matter on that. Yeah, so I think it was very much pushing that better ground to really produce.
So listening to the answer, do you think that the net result of that, of going down those two different paths for the different types of ground is probably, zero sum? The better ground sort of picks up a bit of the slack, for want of a better phrase, from the poorer ground. Do you think that's what might happen on your farm and I guess by extension other similar farms?
Yeah, I mean, I probably haven't got enough good ground, but
which farmer has? I certainly haven't.
Yeah, but it's no, definitely. I think, overall, we're not reducing stock numbers. I've still got a lot of bills to pay. We've got borrowed money. We've got a lot of bills we've got to keep paying. But trying to, really make the most out of everything we've got.
Yeah. And that is what it boils down to, isn't it? Making the most of what we've got. Okay. So Laura, with your AHDB hat on, the Agricultural Horticultural Development Board, that the vast majority of UK farmers will be paying a levy to help support. You work across teams to design farmer-led research and engagement programs. How do these relate to nature and farmed environment?
I think the best thing we can do is to platform the voices of people already doing fantastic things. So we do lots of independent research evidence. That's the purpose, is really how can we fill that market failure gap for things that might not happen unless the levy could be spent on them. So that's kind of the purpose. But I do think one of the most valuable things we do, evidenced by kind of the carbon baselining pilot you're involved in, is that how can we show what people are already doing, the value that farming's already bringing, and how can we create behaviour change by having leaders in the field who are already doing fantastic things showcased to a wider audience. So it doesn't take me standing at the front of a room and talking about BNG.
Quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite. Exactly. It takes demonstrating people who are doing fantastic things, who had a go with putting some chicory and or some herbal lays in 5 years ago and can tell you today it's made this much more of a difference to essentially my bottom line because I can do this, this, this and this.
What didn't?
So it's that trusted facilitator bit is massive. Like the independent research bit is huge as well. We have large, really good programs that do that. But I think the value of being a trusted voice in the middle that can platform people doing fantastic things and bringing people on that journey is huge. Like the peer-to-peer learning bit is the best thing that we do, hands down.
So the peer-to-peer learning, an example of that would be just
so we have
for those people who haven't been on those
completely.
events.
We have like monitor farm events. We have strategic farm events where it's based around kind of a central farmer who wants to go on a journey. They want to achieve something over the next 6 years. That varies in we have huge research programs on the strategic farms, but we also have more kind of behavior based stuff where maybe somebody actually wants to do a carbon audit, and when they baseline again in 5 years, they want to be better. What behavior changes and practice changes can they implement? And then we hang off the back of that a series of meetings, on-farm tours, like trials, demos. It doesn't have to be really big, shiny research. It has to be what are people practically doing on farm.
Yeah.
And we just bring people together and give them a space to kind of talk about it.
Typically locally, so the context is similar.
Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of regionally relevant. We've got bigger research farms as well, but regionally relevant, local. You can follow your monitor farm or your events. You know that you can go to that farmer and ask advice. You've got almost like a peer network set up then.
Yeah.
Very important thing we do.
And it's actually really interesting. I've been fortunate enough to go to a number of different countries in the last 12 months looking at their farming systems, and the ones that are having the best response and uptake to new ideas, it appears to me, are the ones who are using that peer-to-peer piece. Farmers learn best from farmers, and where they are doing that, you see them nailing it, and where farmers are being told and taught, just doesn't seem to have the same traction. So it's really interesting. So you're talking there about learning from best-in-class farmers and taking feedback and understanding what works. With that in mind, what do those farmers say makes a scheme or project particularly successful? An environmental scheme from their point of view.
I think it has to work with the business. It has to work with what you want for the business. I think it has to pay. Market demands action. You follow the market. You can't do something unless it makes sense. But I do think we need to move away from the whole tail wagging the dog situation of waiting for a pot of money to make sense. We need to work out what works for the farm. Like, what do you want to achieve? Whether that be, lowering that carbon baseline, whether it be better water infiltration, better soil health. What can I do to achieve that, and who might pay me for that? Yeah. But that does take resource, brain power, proactivity on top of an already incredibly, you do 9,400 jobs each. Yeah. So it's how can that burden be taken away by people like AHDB a bit, or by, middle parties, trusted advisors. Yeah. How can that burden be removed from you so that you can more easily get on with the day job, but in the direction of travel that you want to go? So it very much has to fit with the farm business. Like my favorite phrase at the minute is put your own life jacket on first. This isn't about offset markets. This is about insetting your own business and your own business resilience. And can somebody pay you to do that? If we've all got to be up here in kind of 10 years time to survive climate change, biodiversity loss, God knows what war next, then how do you get there as resilient as possible and with the most economic support possible? Yeah. But if we're looking at a world with no public subsidy, we're looking at a world with, there's some supply chain premiums maybe disappear. I don't know. Actually, it becomes a right to market to be that resilient, to be sustainable, to have those credentials. And we might not like that, but to operate in the future, we might have to be there. So how can you get paid to get there?
So to be really clear, I want to come back to, you can hear lots come back to on there. So the offsetting piece that you talked about, I'll come to that first. That would be, for example, selling biodiversity net gain credits. I do something on my farm so someone else can benefit. That's an offsetting. When you talk about insetting, that's getting our own ship in order. You talk about getting your life jacket on, your gas mask on first. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think carbon's a big example of that. I do not believe you should be selling carbon off your farm unless you're already at net zero, unless you're already a resilient business. You might need that carbon in the future, and we don't know you might not need that carbon in the future.
That's on mine.
but we'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
But I don't think you sell all of it. You've also got a heck of a lot of hedgerows.
Yeah.
You've got a heck of a lot of soil carbon that's probably not already being accounted. So you've probably got a lot more than you think. But I think it's about how do you balance that between where can I use that to build my own soil health, my own resilience, my own business before I just offset somebody else's. There's 900 middle grounds that make sense. But it shouldn't just be, I'm just selling it for somebody else's offset.
So, Jonathan, we've heard a lot of different things there from Laura. There's a piece around access to market and maybe needing to be at a certain level to access it that I'm interested in. But do you want to come back in on some of what Laura said there?
Yeah, the B&G, the carbon offset, all these things, they kind of reward you for like doing something new or changing things. And really, it's a shame. Well, I'd really like to be rewarded for what we're doing at the minute.
Yeah.
Because we're doing so much at the minute.
Yeah.
I can turn a brilliant productive arable field into a wood and get a load of money. But my 50 acres of woods, which, are 200 years old, they're in a penny towards replacing the ash dieback in them and sorting those out, which could make it more productive.
Yeah, so it comes back to that piece around what do farmers really need? And do you think that Laura's points about the schemes and what we need from the schemes and how they work and operate, do you think that's fair as well?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things on the schemes. I mean, I refer to as subsidy. We all do, but it's not subsidy anymore. It's a payment for services we're delivering.
Yeah. Laura, it's about sort of the way the schemes are structured.
Yeah, I completely agree with the additionality bit, though. That is a massive bugbear. And we have to be creating additionality to have something to sell.
Doing more than we are present.
Doing more than we are at present. But if you've been doing a brilliant job for 20, 30 years and your baseline, like your baseline and the carbon baseline in pilot, I imagine will be quite high. If you're already here, there's not a lot of headroom. There's not a lot of improvement to be made. But I think that's where the nature-based solutions bit comes in. And that's what a lot of the landscape recovery and that sort of thing is. You will be offering services because of that resilience and that baseline being here. You will be locking up lots of carbon in your soil, in all of those hedges, in those trees that are there. How can we better recognise the services that are already being produced from that high baseline? And I think that's where the private market potentially can come in, and it is lagging, but that's what the landscape recoveries are looking at. And I think that's where we'll get the big data of what makes sense where and how we can look at that better, is what services does having a baseline up there deliver, not how can I get from here to here, but I'm already delivering a lot more because I'm there. And how can I be better paid for that? So it is that value share bit and that how can that be better split out? Because if you're already there, you shouldn't be expected to.
On paper at the minute, the best thing I would do is probably plough every acre of the farm, cut every hedge down,
get the baseline down there.
Get the baseline as far on the floor as possible, and then I could qualify for a huge amount of money.
Of course. But
B&G.
If we look at what the actual aim of this is, and I think the markets have distorted this, the aim of this is to get us to a resilient UK farming system that's here. You might already be here, and so it feels unfair that there's not a lot of there. Someone down here will struggle to get there. They will really struggle to get there. And because you have been doing that work, you're already closer to that. And it might not seem fair that there's not the right payment there should be to get to that. But if being there means you can survive as a business, it's all of the unseen benefit and the cost of doing nothing that's really not on the balance sheet either. And I think that's why we have to remember that like food sits within natural capital and nature, and these markets might agree and they might not. And it's a bit rubbish sometimes. But the fact nature and food aren't separate. They rely on each other. It's not an option. It's a business critical strategy to survive and be there.
It feels like that is a suitable point to end on. There's lots to think about. I mean, we've talked there about additionality. We've talked there about getting rewarded for what we do now and whether we'll ever get to that point. So lots and lots to hope for, but a really, really fascinating discussion. Thank you ever so much to Dr. Laura Underdown and Jonathan Chapman for joining me on this week's Farming Focus.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.